I just wanted a quiet house. Then I found an alien girl who thinks I'm her husband. The Discovery Dax Marin's retirement dream was simple: a quiet house on a forgotten world, far from the chaos of interplanetary freight routes. After 23 years hauling cargo between star systems, dodging pirates and navigating bureaucratic nightmares, he'd earned his peace. The real estate agent's hologram had been enthusiastic about the property on Kepler 442c. Pristine wilderness, no neighbors. For hundreds of kilometers, perfect for the discerning hermit. The house itself was a disappointment. Overgrown vines crawled up weathered stone walls and the roof leaked in 3 places. But the isolation was perfect, and the price had been suspiciously low. Dax didn't question good fortune. He'd learned that lesson the hard way in the freight business. His first day was spent clearing debris and assessing repairs. The sunset painted the alien sky in shades of amber and violet, and for the first time in decades, Dax felt truly relaxed. He cooked a simple meal over a portable heater, watched the twin moons rise, and prepared for the best night's sleep of his life. Then the humming started. At first he dismissed it as the house settling or perhaps some kind of wildlife. But the sound was too regular, too mechanical. It seemed to emanate from beneath the floorboards, a low rhythmic pulse that made his teeth ache. Sleep became impossible. Armed with a flashlight and his sidearm, old habits from the freight routes, Dax explored the house's lower levels. Behind a false wall in what appeared to be a storage room, he discovered a hidden staircase leading to a basement that shouldn't exist according to the property schematics. The chamber below was unlike anything he'd seen. Bioluminescent panels lined the walls, casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. Ancient symbols were carved into every surface, and in the center of the room sat a cylindrical containment pod, its surface frosted but transparent. Inside, barely visible through the condensation, was a humanoid figure. The pod's status display showed readings in a script he didn't recognize, but the declining numbers needed no translation. Whatever preservation system had kept the occupant in stasis was failing. Dax watched, transfixed, as the frosting cleared and revealed her face, delicate features, skin with a faint silver luminescence, and long dark hair that seemed to float. Despite the liquid medium, the pod opened with a soft hiss, releasing a cloud of vapor that smelled of ozone and flowers. The girl's eyes fluttered open, eyes that were a brilliant shade of gold, like twin stars. She sat up slowly, water cascading from her ceremonial robes, and looked directly at Dax with an expression of serene recognition. She spoke in a language that sounded like music, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his chest. His translation, AI, a standard military issue device, struggled with the dialect but managed fragments. The call answered, dwelling accepted, sacred bond. Then she switched to accented but clear standard. You came for me, bondmate. I knew you would. Dax's mouth went dry. I think there's been a mistake. I just bought this house. I didn't know anyone was down here. Her golden eyes searched his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. The house chooses its keeper, and the keeper accepts the bond. You are Dax Marin, freight master of the cargo vessel Steady Fortune. You purchased the dwelling of House Velnari for 43,000 credits 17 days ago. The specificity of her knowledge hit him like a physical blow. How do you know that? She stepped from the pod with fluid grace, leaving wet footprints on the ancient stone. Despite her apparent delicacy, there was something predatory in her movements, like a cat that had just spotted prey. I am Zafira Velnari, last daughter of the Crimson lineage, and you, by accepting ownership of our ancestral dwelling, have bound yourself to me according to laws older than your species' first ventures into space. Dax backed toward the stairs, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Look, Lady Zafira, I don't know what kind of legal loophole you're talking about, but I'm not bound to anyone. I just wanted a quiet place to retire. Her laugh was like silver bells, but there was sadness in it. The universe rarely grants us what we want, bondmate, only what we need. She gestured to the symbols on the walls, which were now glowing brighter. The contract you signed was written in the old tongue, encoded with binding rituals. Your signature didn't just purchase property, It accepted a sacred trust. The implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. You're saying I'm married? To you? Bonded, she corrected. More than marriage, less than slavery. We are connected now, for better or worse. Her expression grew serious. And I fear it may be for worse. My people didn't hide me here by choice, Dax Marin. They were trying to save the last of our bloodline from those who would see it extinct. Outside, something howled in the alien night, a sound that definitely wasn't wildlife. Part 2. Unwelcome knowledge. Dax spent the next morning trying to convince himself the previous night had been an elaborate dream. But Zephyra was very real, very present, and very much making herself at home in his kitchen. She moved with an eerie familiarity through the house, preparing what appeared to be breakfast from supplies he didn't remember buying. The pantry has been restocked automatically. For centuries, she explained, noting his confusion. House Velnari was prepared for a long hibernation. She handed him a cup of something that smelled like coffee, but tasted like liquid starlight. Your nervous system is compatible with our cuisine. Another sign of the bond's authenticity, Dax. Set the cup down with shaking hands. This is insane. I'm a freight hauler, not some cosmic bridegroom. There has to be a way to undo this bond. Zephyra's golden eyes flickered with something that might have been pain. Do you find me so repulsive? The question caught him off guard. Repulsive was the last word he'd used to describe her, even accounting for the alien features, the slight luminescence of her skin, the way her hair seemed to move and non-existent, breezes, the unsettling depth of her gaze. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. But beauty wasn't the issue. It's not about that, he said carefully. It's about choice. I never chose this. Nor did I. Her voice carried a weight that made him look up sharply. I was prepared for bonding from birth, trained to be the perfect companion for whichever mate the house deemed suitable. I had no more choice in this than you. She sat across from him, her robes, which had somehow dried and arranged themselves perfectly, rustling softly. But here we are. Dax rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. Okay, let's say I accept this bonding thing is real. What exactly does it mean? What are my obligations? Traditionally, you would provide protection and resources while I managed the household and bore children to continue the bloodline. She paused at his horrified expression. But these are not traditional times. The bond can be flexible. Flexible how? The core requirement is proximity and mutual care. The house needs both a keeper and a heart to survive. Without both, it will decay and die. She gestured to the walls around them. This building is not just stone and metal. It's a living entity, sustained by the life force of its bonded pair. As if responding to her words, the house's walls seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. Dax noticed for the first time that the repairs he'd been planning seemed less urgent. Cracks in the stone had filled themselves and the leaky roof showed no signs of damage. The house is alive? Semi-sentient. It protects what it values. Zephyra's expression grew troubled, which is why I'm concerned about the visitors we had last night. Dax's blood chilled. Visitors? You didn't notice them? 3 ships, running, silent, scanning the perimeter. She moved to a window and pointed toward the horizon. They withdrew at dawn, but they'll be back. They've been hunting me for a very long time. He joined her at the window, seeing only the peaceful alien landscape. Who's hunting you and why? The hegemony of suns, she said, and her voice carried a hatred so pure it made the air around her shimmer. A collective of species that believes genetic diversity weakens the galaxy. They've been systematically eliminating what they call aberrant bloodlines for 3 centuries. And you're aberrant how? Zephyra turned to face him, and her golden eyes began to glow with an inner fire. My people were telepathic, telekinetic, and capable of limited precognition. We could commune with technology, bend space-time on a small scale, and our lifespan stretched for millennia. The glow intensified. The hegemony fears what they cannot control. The implications hit him like a freight hauler at full burn. "They're coming for you." "They're coming for us," she corrected. "The bond makes you a target as well. Anyone who aids an aberrant bloodline is considered complicit." She moved away from the window, her movements now tense and alert. "I'm sorry. Dax, I truly am. You sought peace and found only war." Dax thought about the quiet retirement he'd planned, the simple life of fishing and solitude. Then he looked at Zephyra, this strange, beautiful, dangerous woman who'd been thrust into his life by cosmic coincidence and ancient law. The smart thing would be to run. Pack his few belongings, break whatever mystical contract he'd stumbled into, and find another quiet world. But he'd spent 23 years in space, and he'd learned something important. Running from problems only made them bigger. "How long do we have?" he asked. Relief flickered across her features. "You're staying?" "I'm staying. This is my house now, apparently, and you're my—" He struggled with the word. "Bondmate. I don't abandon my obligations." He moved toward the basement stairs. "But I'm going to need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. Starting with that pod and whatever other surprises are hidden down there." Zephyra followed him, and for the first time since waking, she smiled. "There are indeed more surprises, bondmate. Some of them might even help us survive what's coming." Revelations and preparations. The basement held secrets that redefined Dax's understanding of his new home. Beyond the stasis chamber, hidden panels revealed an armory that would make a military quartermaster weep with envy. Energy weapons of designs he'd never seen, armor that shifted and adapted to its wearer, and devices whose purposes he could only guess at. House Velnari was not just a family seat, Zephyra explained, running her fingers along a wall that responded to her touch by revealing more hidden compartments. "We were guardians, protectors of knowledge the galaxy wasn't ready to receive. My ancestors prepared for the day when the hegemony would come." Dax lifted what appeared to be a rifle, but its weight distribution was all wrong, and it hummed with barely contained energy. "This tech is centuries ahead of anything I've seen in the freight lanes. Millennia," she corrected. "My people had a different relationship with technology. We didn't just build machines. We grew them, nurtured them, formed symbiotic bonds." She placed her hand on the weapon in his grip, and it suddenly felt natural, like an extension of his arm. "The house recognizes you as bonded. Its gifts are yours to command." The implications were staggering. Dax had always been good with machinery, a necessity in the freight business, but this was something else entirely. He could feel the weapon's power systems, understand its firing modes instinctively, even sense its ammunition reserves without looking at any display. The bond isn't just ceremonial, he realized. No, it creates a genuine connection between bonded pairs, allowing them to share knowledge, abilities, even life force in extreme circumstances. Zephyra moved to another section of the armory, where sleeker, more elegant weapons waited. "It's why the hegemony fears us. Bonded pairs are exponentially more capable than the sum of their parts." Dax set the weapon aside, his mind reeling. "You're telling me I'm becoming something more than human?" "You're becoming yourself, but enhanced. The bond doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you could be." She paused, studying his expression. "The process can be intense. Are you experiencing any unusual sensations?" Now that she mentioned it, he was. His hearing seemed sharper, able to pick up the house's subtle mechanical sounds. His vision was clearer, more detailed, and there was something else, a constant awareness of Zephyra's presence, her emotional state, even when she wasn't in sight. "I can feel you," he admitted. "Not physically, but emotionally? It's like you're broadcasting your feelings." She nodded gravely. "The telepathic component. It will strengthen over time. Eventually, we'll be able to communicate without words, share memories, even coordinate our thoughts in combat." The word combat brought him back to their immediate problem. "Speaking of which, how much time do we have to prepare?" Zephyra closed her eyes, her face taking on a look of deep concentration. The golden light in her irises intensified, and the air around her began to shimmer. They're mobilizing a hunting pack. 12 ships, military grade. They'll arrive within 2 days, possibly sooner if they detect increased activity from the house. Can we evacuate? Get off world before they arrive? The bond won't allow it. Too much distance from the house would be painful, potentially fatal. She opened her eyes and he could see fear there for the first time. We make our stand here or not at all. Dax surveyed the armory again, calculating odds and possibilities. 12 military ships against 2 people, even with advanced weapons, seemed like suicide. But he'd survived the freight lanes by thinking creatively, using every advantage available. Tell me about the house's defenses. Zephyra's fear transformed into something that might have been hope. You're thinking like a warrior already. The bonding is accelerating. She moved to what appeared to be a blank wall and pressed her palm against it. The wall dissolved, revealing a control room that belonged in a starship's bridge. Holographic displays showed the surrounding terrain, complete with energy signatures, atmospheric readings, and movement tracking. Defense grids were marked in glowing blue, offensive capabilities in red. The house, Dax realized, wasn't a home at all. It was a fortress designed to look like one. Shield generators here and here. Zephyra pointed to the displays. Weapons emplacements disguised as garden features, underground tunnels connecting to emergency shelters and escape routes, and the house itself can detach from its foundations and achieve limited flight. It's a ship, Dax breathed. A very old, very powerful ship that's been pretending to be architecture for centuries. She manipulated the controls, and the displays shifted to show weapon configurations. But it's been dormant for so long, many systems are untested. We'll need to bring everything online carefully, quietly, without alerting the hegemony to our true capabilities. Dax studied the tactical situation with the eye of someone who'd navigated hostile space for decades. The terrain offered good defensive positions, and the house's sensor net would give them advance warning of any approach. But 12 ships meant they'd likely face orbital bombardment, and no ground-based defense could stand against that indefinitely. We need to make them come to us, he said finally. Get them on the ground where our advantages matter. Zephyra nodded approvingly. The bonding is definitely accelerating. You're thinking like a Velnari already. She activated another series of displays. The house has signal dampeners, sensor scramblers, even holographic projectors to create false readings. We can make ourselves appear weaker than we are, more vulnerable. A trap. A very elaborate trap. But are you prepared for what it means? Her golden eyes searched his face intently. Once we fight together, the bond becomes permanent. There will be no going back to your quiet retirement, no escape from what you'll become. Dax thought about his old life, the endless freight runs, the isolation, the grinding routine that had left him feeling empty. Then he looked at Zephyra, this incredible woman who'd been thrust into his existence by ancient law and cosmic accident. She represented everything his old life had lacked: purpose, connection, meaning. I've been running from one kind of life, or another, for 47 years, he said. Maybe it's time to start running toward something instead. The hunt begins. The hegemony ships arrived like harbingers of death, their sleek black hulls drinking in the light of the system's star. From the house's hidden observation dome, Dax watched through enhanced sensors as the fleet arranged itself in a standard planetary assault formation. 12 vessels, just as Zephyra had predicted, each one capable of glassing a continent. Predator class destroyers, he identified, drawing on his freight-hauling experience with military vessels. Fast, heavily armed, designed for precision strikes against high-value targets. Beside him, Zephyra's eyes glowed with concentrated focus as she communed with the house's sensor network. They're conducting deep scans trying to penetrate our deception fields. The fleet commander is cautious, probably Admiral Kethvar of the 3rd Purification Fleet. You know him? Her expression hardened. He's the one who destroyed my homeworld. Billions of my people, reduced to stellar ash because we dared to be different. The air around her shimmered with barely contained power. I've been waiting 3 centuries for this chance. 3 centuries. The number hit Dax like a physical blow. He'd been thinking of Zephyra as young, but she was older than his entire species' spacefaring history. The woman beside him had watched civilizations rise and fall, had endured the systematic extinction of her people, and had been waiting in hibernation for someone, anyone, to give her a chance at revenge. "The scans are intensifying," she reported. "They're detecting power signatures but can't pin down their source. The house's camouflage is holding." On the tactical display, one of the ships broke formation, descending toward the planet's surface. Dax felt a chill of anticipation mixed with terror. This was it. The quiet retirement that had lasted exactly 4 days was about to become a war zone. "Single ship approaching," he observed. "Probably a reconnaissance force." "No," Zephyra corrected, her voice tight with concentration. "It's Kethvar himself. His personal flagship, the Extinction's Edge. He wants to oversee my capture personally." The ship's approach was methodical, cautious. Its sensors swept the terrain in overlapping patterns, while defensive screens flickered around its hull. As it drew closer, Dax could make out weapons emplacements that could level mountains and shields that could deflect anything short of a direct stellar core collapse. "How do we fight something like that?" he asked. Zephyra smiled, and there was something terrifying in the expression. "We don't fight it, bondmate. We seduce it." She activated a series of controls, and the house's systems responded with subtle grace. Energy readings fluctuated to suggest aging equipment operating at minimal capacity. Defensive screens flickered sporadically, as if failing. Even the house's physical structure seemed to sag slightly, projecting an image of decay and vulnerability. "They're hailing us," Zephyra reported. "Audio only. Put it through." The voice that filled the control room was cold, mechanical, filtered through translation software that stripped away any hint of emotion. "Zephyra Velnari of the Crimson Lineage, I am Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Third Fleet. You will surrender yourself for processing, or we will reduce your location to its alpha component atoms." Zephyra activated the response system, but when she spoke, her voice was weak, frightened, a perfect performance. "Admiral, I've been in stasis for so long, my systems are failing. I can barely maintain life support." "You are bonded to a human." Kethavar's voice carried a note of disgust. "This complicates the situation. Surrender both yourself and your bondmate, and his death will be swift." Dax felt a surge of anger at the casual dismissal of his life, but Zephyra's hand on his arm kept him silent. The bond between them pulsed with shared emotion, her determination, her careful planning, and underneath it all, a love for her dead people that burned like a star going nova. "Please," she continued in that carefully modulated, weak voice. "Don't hurt him. He doesn't understand what he's gotten into. I'll come quietly if you promise to let him live. The human will be processed according to hegemony protocols. His fate is not your concern." There was a pause filled with the sound of instruments recalibrating. "I'm detecting only minimal power signatures from your location. Are your defensive systems operational?" "Barely," Zephyra lied smoothly. "The house has been dormant for centuries. Most systems are offline." Another pause, longer this time. Dax could imagine the alien admiral considering his options, weighing the risks of a trap against the glory of personally capturing the last member of a bloodline. His fleet had spent centuries hunting. "I'm coming down personally," Kethvar announced finally. "Any attempt at resistance will result in orbital bombardment. You have 10 minutes to prepare for surrender." The communication cut off, leaving them in tense silence. On the tactical display, the flagship began its final approach while the other 11 ships maintained orbital positions with weapons trained on the house. "He took the bait," Dax observed. "Perfectly. His arrogance is exactly what I hoped for." Zephyra's performance of weakness dropped away, replaced by a predator's focus. "He wants to look into my eyes when he kills me, to see the last light of my people's defiance fade. That pride will be his downfall." She activated the house's true defensive systems, and Dax felt the ancient structure come alive around them. Power flowed through circuits that had been dormant for centuries. Weapon systems that had been disguised as architectural features revealed their true nature, and deep beneath their feet, massive engines hummed to life. "What's the plan?" he asked, checking his weapon and feeling the house's systems integrate with his thoughts. "We let him land. Let him think he's won. Then we show him what the last daughter of House Velnari can do when she's properly motivated." Zephyra's golden eyes blazed with an inner fire that made the air itself seem to burn. And what a bonded pair can accomplish when they fight as one. Through the observation dome, they watched the extinction's edge settle onto the cleared ground. Before the house, like a bird of prey claiming its kill, hatches opened and armored figures began to emerge. Soldiers of a dozen different species united only by their shared hatred of genetic diversity. Admiral Kethvar was the last to exit his ship, a towering figure in ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished bone. Even at a distance, Dax could sense the alien's absolute confidence, the certainty of someone who had never known defeat. "Ready, bondmate?" Zephyra asked. Dax felt the house's weapon systems merge with his consciousness, felt Zephyra's tactical knowledge flow into his mind through their bond, felt the accumulated fury of a dead civilization burning in his chest like a second heart. "Ready," he said, and meant it. Blood and starlight. The trap was sprung with the precision of a master clockmaker's creation. Admiral Kethvar approached the house with 40 elite soldiers, their weapons trained on every window and door. They moved in perfect formation, a killing machine honed by centuries of genocide. But they were looking for a frightened girl and her human companion, not the awakened fury of House Velnari. Dax felt the moment through the bond, Zephyra's consciousness touching each defensive system like a conductor raising her baton. The house responded with lethal grace. What had appeared to be decorative garden stones revealed themselves as concealed weapon emplacements. The very ground beneath the hegemony soldiers erupted with energy discharges that turned armor into vapor and flesh into memory. But Admiral Kethvar was not so easily dispatched. His personal shields flared to life, deflecting the first wave of attacks as he dove for cover behind his troops. "Clever," came his voice over comms, no longer cold but filled with anticipation. "You have some fight left after all. Good. It would have been disappointing if the last Velnari died quietly." Zephyra's response came not through words but through action. The house's main entrance dilated like an iris, and she emerged wearing armor that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. In her hands was a weapon that hurt to look directly at, a rifle that channeled the very forces that held atoms together. Dax followed, his own equipment humming with power he was only beginning to understand. Through the bond, he could feel. Zephyra's tactical awareness could see the battlefield through her enhanced senses. It was intoxicating and terrifying, like suddenly becoming superhuman while retaining all too human fears. The first exchange of fire lit up the alien twilight. Kethvar's remaining soldiers were professionals, but they were fighting an opponent who could predict their movements and a fortress that responded to her thoughts. Dax found himself moving with impossible precision, his weapon firing at targets he hadn't consciously selected while his feet carried him along paths that avoided incoming fire by microseconds. "You're adapting quickly." Zephyra's voice came directly into his mind, warm with approval. "Most bondmates take weeks to achieve this level of synchronization. Most bondmates don't have 3 centuries of pent-up fury to draw on," he replied, through the same mental channel, his physical voice occupied with coordinating the house's defensive systems. The battle was turning in their favor when Admiral Kethvar revealed why he'd earned his reputation. A device emerged from his armor, a small sphere that pulsed with malevolent energy. The moment it activated, Dax felt something tear at the bond between him and Zephyra, like claws raking across his soul. "Bond disruptor," Zephyra gasped, her perfect coordination faltering as the connection between them wavered. "Illegal tech, banned by every civilized species." Kethvar's laugh was the sound of worlds dying. "Civilization is a luxury the galaxy can no longer afford. Only the pure may inherit the stars." With their bond disrupted, the house's systems began to malfunction. Weapons that had been firing with surgical precision now scattered their shots wildly. Defensive screens flickered and failed. Worst of all, Dax could feel Zephyra's pain as the disruptor tore at the very essence of what she was. But pain, Dax had learned in the freight lanes, was just another variable to account for. And fury was fuel. He charged directly at the Admiral, his weapon forgotten in favor of the most primitive solution possible. Kethvar, expecting a coordinated assault from two bonded fighters, was unprepared for one human's simple, stupid, brutally direct attack. They collided with enough force to shatter the alien's personal shields, and Dax's fist found the bond disruptor. The device cracked under the impact, its malevolent energies dispersing harmlessly. Instantly, the connection between Dax and Zephyra snapped back into place with an intensity that left them both gasping. But now there was something more, a deeper understanding, a recognition of what they'd almost lost. What happened next would be remembered in House Velnari's records for as long as the universe had memory. Zephyra rose into the air, her body wreathed in energies that made the local star seem dim by comparison. Every weapon system in the house turned toward the orbiting fleet, no longer disguised as anything but instruments of war. "You killed my people," she said, and her voice carried across space itself to reach the 11 ships above. "You turned their worlds to glass and ash. You hunted us across the galaxy like animals. But you made one mistake, Admiral." Kethvar struggled to his feet, his armor cracked and his confidence finally shaken. "What mistake?" "You assumed we'd go quietly into extinction." Zephyra gestured, and the house rose from its foundations, revealing the starship it had always been. "House Velnari accepts your challenge." The battle that followed was less a fight than a demonstration. Weapons that had been dormant for centuries, fired with the precision of instruments tuned by gods. The first hegemony ship died before its captain could even order evasive action. The second managed to return fire before it too became expanding plasma. By the time the third ship began to retreat, it was already too late. Admiral Kethvar, architect of genocide, last survivor of his fleet, watched his life's work burn in the alien sky. When he spoke, his voice held a note Dax had never heard from him before. Fear. This isn't over. The hegemony is vast. Others will come. Zephyra descended to stand before him, beautiful and terrible as a force of nature. Let them come. The crimson lineage is no longer the last of its kind. She gestured to Dax, and he could feel the changes in himself. The enhanced awareness, the deeper connection to technology, the sense of being something more than he'd been before. Every bonding creates a new branch of the bloodline. Every partnership spreads our gifts further into the galaxy. Impossible, Kethvar breathed. The genetic markers, the bloodline purity, was never about genetics, Dax realized, the understanding flowing through the bond. It was about consciousness, about connection, about choosing to be more than the sum of your parts. He looked at Zephyra, this incredible woman who'd transformed his quiet retirement into the adventure of several lifetimes. Anyone can carry the bloodline if they're willing to accept what it means. Kethvar's final expression was one of perfect absolute despair. He'd spent centuries hunting an enemy that reproduced not through biology, but through love, connection, and the simple choice to be better than what you were born as. Every world he'd sterilized, every bloodline he'd ended, had only made that choice more precious to those who survived to make it. Later, after the hegemony admiral was dead and his fleet was debris cooling in the void, Dax and Zephyra stood on the observation deck of their home, no longer disguised as a house but revealed as the starship it had always been. The alien sunset painted the sky in familiar shades of amber and violet, but now those colors seemed less foreign and more like home. "So what now?" Dax asked. "Do we stay here? Look for other survivors? Hunt down the rest of the hegemony?" Zephyra considered the question, her golden eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. The universe is vast, and there are others like us out there. People who've been told they're wrong for being different, who've been hunted for refusing to fit into someone else's vision of perfection. She smiled, and it was the expression of someone who'd found her purpose after centuries of loss. I think it's time House Velnari went recruiting. Dax thought about his old life, the endless freight runs between stars that had never felt like home. Then he thought about the bond that connected him to this extraordinary woman, the house ship that responded to their combined will, and the infinite possibilities that stretched before them. He'd come to this world looking for peace and quiet. Instead, he'd found something infinitely more valuable, a reason to fight, a partner to fight beside, and a cause worth believing in. "Well," he said, settling into the captain's chair that molded itself to fit him perfectly, "I always did like a challenge." Through the bond, he felt Zephyra's laughter like sunlight warming his soul, and together they turned their ship toward the stars. The end.